just a little insane. A couple shots, I can't feel no pain. Hey, where have I been? And who are these scary men? Is this all real? Is this all necessary? Or is this a joke? Man, you know, I don't regret it all. They locked me up for good, pinned me against the wall. I can't find the exit, I quit looking for doors. I stole a razor from the commissary, I just couldn't take it no more. I'm swimming in blood, like a rat on a sewer floor. No longer insane, just part of this crazy dream.
Just part of this crazy dream. Yes, I kind of was sort of stripping in the background, but just stripping of my coat because, you know, it's July and something to be said for fashion. There's also something to be said for not sort of overheating. So I stripped away my coat. It's over there. And I'm back for the second half where we're going to be talking about Mr. David Icke. Let me just bring in the Facebook audience again. Yeah, it should take a second here. I didn't even know I had this ability. It's kind of nifty. So welcome back, Facebook, and welcome to the second half of the show. And we are going to be talking about the infamous David Icke, and I'm going to be familiarizing some of you with who David Icke is, what he represents, and give you a little background. So people should know that I'm not a stranger to David Icke. I actually had a little run-in with David in, I don't know what year it was. He was coming to Canada to do a speaking engagement when I was still on the campus of Simon Fraser University. And if we see here, I've got all of these books. These are all David Icke books. Okay, so there's the one, "And the Truth Shall Set You Free." We might want to put truth in quotes there. We'll get to that. So these two ones. The Biggest Secret is the one that really sort of, can you see that? Can I get it over on an angle? Biggest Secret. A little overexposed there. But that one really has some interesting stuff in it. And then he followed it up with Children of the Matrix. I had to read all of his books when I was in university. Let's put my bracelets back on. I can't take off my jacket without taking off my spike bracelets, or I'll rip the lining of my jacket. Put back my signature spike bracelets. But I had to read his books because I ended up writing an essay on him. So what happened was that when I was still at university, I was a big freedom of speech advocate. I was a Noam Chomsky disciple, who was probably one of the preeminent champions of freedom of speech in the 20th century, really. So because I was from this free speech tradition, and because Icke was coming and people were trying to shut him down, Ironically, much like what happens to me now, I decided to say, listen, free speech says that you need to let people speak. But they were throwing out all of these accusations about David Icke, saying that he was an anti-Semite and all of this stuff, and was spreading, the blood libel and all of this stuff. So I wanted to sort of be able to deal with all of the points that people were sort of raising about David Icke in a substantive and academic way. So I went out and I got all of his books and I read them and sort of took them apart and used them in my defense of his right to speak freely. So it is not, David Icke is not new to me. I'm quite familiar with him, but some of his ideas are quite sort of wild. So for those who are not familiar with David Icke, what I'm going to do is I am going to bring in what I've done is I've gone out and I've clipped some different documentaries and stuff to give you an idea of exactly who David Icke is, because I believe that so what David Icke is doing today is David Icke is in what I call one of his more reasonable phases. But he does this, he goes back and forth, right? So he's in one of his more reasonable phases, and he's making certain privileged information claims. Okay. I've made some of those myself. Okay. But whenever you're making a privileged information claim, or you're looking at somebody who's making a privileged information claim, you have to know something about the person and whether or not you're going to be willing to trust them as a good source of this type of information. In order to sort of understand that, you need to understand who the person is you're dealing with. So let me just give you a little background thing that I've put together for you on who and what David Icke is. And I think even if you know who he is, I think you'll enjoy this. I spent some time researching it and putting it together. Bear with me here. Here I go.
It's one of the most bizarre conspiracy theories today. Ancient, blood-sucking lizard people disguised as humans who secretly rule the world. Where did this bizarre theory start? And is there any chance that it's all true? They go by many names. Anunnaki, Dracarians, or reptilian humanoids. But most refer to them simply as the lizard people. This conspiracy sounds like something right out of science fiction. According to the theory, lizard people are cold-blooded, human-like reptilian creatures who can shape-shift into human form on command. Many kings, queens, world leaders, and celebrities count among their ranks, and they supposedly use their ability to gain power and influence in governments and business all across the globe. Believers tend to look for a few telltale signs: red hair, green eyes, good hearing, and unexplained scars are all considered hints that a prominent person might be a lizard in disguise. They supposedly came to Earth from the star system Alpha Draconis and lurk in the underground layers, always plotting to overthrow humanity. Some even suggest these ravenous reptiles survive by sucking the blood of unsuspecting victims. If this sounds less like fact and a little bit more like fantasy, that's because it is. Scholars believe they can trace the origins of this outlandish conspiracy to a short story called The Shadow Kingdom, which was published in a magazine called Weird Tales in 1929. In this story, there's an ancient, almost extinct race of reptilian humanoids who rule the world from the shadows, using their magic to disguise themselves as any person they want. Sound familiar? So that's where the idea started. An innocent short story about shape-shifting serpent men who control the earth. But how did it go from science fiction to all-out conspiracy theory? You can thank a man named David Icke for that. Icke is something of a celebrity conspiracy theorist. He wrote a book in 1999 that popularized the lizard people conspiracy. And over the years, he's given talks all around the world and written more books on the subject. You'd think for a theory that has so little evidence, there would be very few who buy into it. Yet, according to a 2013 poll, About 4 to 7% of Americans believe the lizard people conspiracy. And while that number sounds small, it represents millions of people. So let's clear the air once and for all. There's no evidence whatsoever that the lizard people are real. So you can sleep soundly at night, knowing that our celebrities and world leaders aren't secretly reptilian humanoids. It turns out, you don't need shape-shifting lizard powers to rule the world.
Link, what is your opinion on lizards?
I respect lizards, but I do not touch them.
What if I told you that they were in a secret space station inside the moon controlling everything you think?
I would say, I wouldn't believe you unless you started shaking your head and like laughing maniacally under your breath. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm in on whatever this is.
Well, that's an oversimplification of something that a man named David Icke does believe. David Icke, he believes that the world is controlled by a race of 12-foot-tall, blood-sucking, shape-shifting alien reptilian human hybrids. That's a bold claim. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of background, okay?
Well, bold's one adjective I'd use. Another one is
you don't
crazy.
believe it? Well,
it's and awesome.
It remains to be
Sounds
seen.
awesome.
Okay, he's a guy that played soccer back in the 70s.
Oh.
He only played for a little bit, but then he became a sportscaster and actually became like a public figure in England. He was well known as a sportscaster.
Oh, really? Okay.
Think Bob Costas without the pink eye at the Olympics. In 1990, he was in a bookstore, as sportscasters love to frequent bookstores, and he heard a voice telling him to go to a certain section. And this wasn't like from the intercom, like science.
Wasn't like a librarian. It was a librarian like whispering through there, like,
no.
You should check out. What did he check out?
It was the psychic section.
You should check out the psychic section.
So it was a voice. He actually felt a magnetic force pulling him towards the section, which would be a great thing to install at Barnes & Noble if you're listening. But
go to the psychic section.
It happened to him. And he goes to the psychic section. There's a book by a particular psychic. He decides not just to read her book, but to visit her. Anyway, during his visit with her, she basically tells him that he is special and that the spirit world is going to bring messages to Earth through him. He took this incredibly seriously.
And so are you.
How seriously? Well, in 1991, very shortly after the psychic woman interaction, he held a press conference. Again, this is a public figure. Think Bob Costas. This is like Bob Costas doing a press conference.
Okay.
Saying that the world is coming to an end, and also, I am the son of the Godhead. He was wearing a turquoise tracksuit while he did this, which is a key
really?
detail. Because he was also entering the turquoise period, where
like
that's what he calls it, man.
Like once a month, or
and this isn't just like something like your wife goes through in May. You know, he was in a period where he felt like he had. And
my wife does not wear tracksuits.
First of all, this was not intentional. I swear to you that wearing this shirt was not intentional. He goes through this period where he's wearing this turquoise.
That's not a tracksuit though.
Tracksuit or turquoise in general because it brought him closer to God and also helped channel positive energy.
Sure.
Everything kind of unraveled for him after that point. He was a laughingstock in England and beyond. And he couldn't go into a pub without being made fun of. He was being chased by the paparazzi. People were like, it's Bob Costas. I'm putting it in terms for you. Bob Costas is crazy. Oh, he wears a tracksuit. Mm-hmm. So this got into a point where he was willing to just let go of, he had no reservations, and he just started saying exactly what he thought, which is, he believes the world is controlled by a small group of people called the Babylonian Brotherhood, kind of like the Illuminati. You know, they've infiltrated the government and they're running the world. They're the people who are really in control, not the puppets like the presidents and the prime ministers, but actually the Babylonian Brotherhood.
But they're shape-shifting lizards?
They're shape-shifting human-lizard hybrids, Link, because back in Babylonian times, thousands of years ago, these lizard aliens came to Earth and they mated and they made human-lizard hybrid people that have started this race that have, through the generations, ruled the world. You can't tell it because they're shape-shifting. You can't just look at them. They don't have weird eyes or anything. They don't smell like they've been in a pet store. They are just these hybrid shapeshifters. But here's a few people that he believes are these lizard people. Queen Elizabeth II, the Bush family, that's George, the first George and the second George, Bob Hope, Al Gore, Chris Christopherson,
Chris Christopherson,
country singer and actor, and Boxcar Willie, Which this is the
He's
most.
a country music singer too,
He
right?
is, and this is the most convincing to me because he has a song called 16 Chickens and a Tambourine.
I'm sure it's a great.
And he also
16
believes
chickens and a
that
tambourine.
the moon
All I need in life.
is the moon
know.
is like the Death Star. It's an empty space. It's a planetoid. It's empty, and the lizards are in there. They have control over it, and it's like a satellite that is broadcasting what he calls a moon matrix, which causes you and me and everyone on Earth to not be able to see reality for what it is. It's being broadcast.
Now the moon matrix, I do believe in.
The Moon, Earth's only natural satellite. It orbits the planet approximately every 27 days, at a distance of 380,000 kilometers away. In total, 12 people have walked on the Moon in various missions between 1969 and 1972. But there is a widespread popular conspiracy theory that the US staged these expeditions in a film studio, and mankind has never actually been to the Moon. However, some theorists go one step further, presenting the notion that not only the moon landings were faked, but the moon itself is fake too. Instead, they argue, it is a hologram projected by a conspiring government alliance. But could there possibly be any truth in this? Is there any chance that the moon as we know it doesn't even exist? In 2013, YouTube user Crow777 began posting a series of videos, which he claims show proof that the moon is not what it seems. After over a year of observation, Crow filmed what he called lunar waves, which look like ripples passing across the surface of the moon. According to Crow, these waves demonstrate that the moon is a hologram. He says that the ripples are actually power glitches in an artificial electrical system. He further asserts that he has been contacted by 3 individuals who are supposedly privy to classified information and were able to confirm his suspicions. And Crow777 is not alone in his beliefs. Prominent conspiracy theorist and outspoken broadcaster David Icke argues that humanity should not be tricked into believing the moon exists just because figures of authority have said that it does. Icke strongly advocates the idea that the moon is not a natural body, stating on his website that it is instead a control system, manipulating our sense of reality to make us the slave race of those who are doing it. David Icke offers a variety of explanations for the purpose of this elaborate hoax. He suggests that the hologram could be part of global Illuminati interference. By tricking the entire world into believing in a moon that doesn't really exist, the secret society of elites would demonstrate its ultimate control over the spread of knowledge. Alternatively, if the idea of a hologram hiding the actual moon were true, it would provide elite scientists with the opportunity to experiment on the natural satellite without public realization. The real moon could have been drastically altered, destroyed, or even colonized by alien life forms without our knowledge, with a hologram conveniently hiding the truth. There are numerous flaws with the conjecture that the moon is a hologram, not least that the theory doesn't offer an alternative explanation for tidal forces, which physicists say are produced by the moon's gravity affecting the Earth.
Oh, good.
Like, I've been with that for years.
Tracksuit moon matrix.
Right.
Now here.
So
now I've
I'm
said all these outlandish things. Here's the interesting thing, Link. I don't know if this guy's crazy. He may not be. I'm not going to convince you of anything. It's your brain is your own.
Something to think about.
I now have a matrix broadcasting towards you.
Okay.
Is he just a crazy dude in a tracksuit that nobody listens to? No, he has a massive following, millions of people.
Really?
Huge following. He goes on these tours around the world and he does 8-hour-long lectures. You know, he's a very charismatic guy and he's funny and he's got like some interesting visuals and you know, he's got this message that really resonates with
Does
people.
he not mention the lizards? Is that really what
no.
it is?
He talks about the lizards, but let me get to that. So, what he says resonates with a lot of people. You know, because it isn't just about the lizards, right? It's about not trusting the media. It's about how people are like sheep. They're easily controlled, that we should be caring for one another, that all these things that I think a lot of people can really agree with.
Yeah,
but then he does bring in the lizard people and he's not ashamed of it. But here's an interesting way to see that. A lot of people think that this is like a satire type thing. Having watched a bunch of his interviews, I don't think that's what's going on. I think this is a better theory, and this is some people believe this, is that he's actually part of the conspiracy himself. he is actually an agent, meaning he's saying a bunch of things that are true, and then he's saying a bunch of things that are just crazy, like the lizards and the moon, so that you...
So discredit the lizard and then discredit the part that they don't want you to believe is true.
Because you're like, crazy people believe in that secret society. You hear about the moon matrix and the lizard and stuff? But it actually is true, and they put him out there as an agent to confuse people. That's an interesting theory.
That is an interesting theory. That also happens to be a theory that I have had in regards to David Icke for a very long time. And it's an old strategy, is that you get people attached to people who seem to be spinning good messages, and then you sort of blindside them with all of this crazy stuff. And when you're targeting, when we're talking about propaganda and mass mind manipulation strategies, and Edward L. Bernays, who was one of the great sort of masters of mass mind manipulation, who worked on, I think, 3 different presidential campaigns, he said that when you are targeting the population, you don't target sort of true believers and stuff. You target the undecided. Okay, so whatever messages you're putting out there, you have to target with the bulk of the undecided in mind. And the undecided, if you can get them to say, believe that, oh, David Icke is putting out this great information, he's so reliable, and they don't know anything about David Icke, and then somebody brings in this, oh, David Icke, he's that shape-shifting alien guy. People get offended by that, and now they look ridiculous, and nobody wants to talk about it anymore. So that, I think, might be something about what's going on with David Icke. Now, I think that this is because there's a broader program going on, and this is David Icke, again, is in one of his more reasonable phases where he's bringing in a lot of people who are listening to him and saying he makes so much sense and stuff. And many of these people I find are totally oblivious to the fact that just very recently he was talking about this moon matrix thing that was controlling everybody and creating this fake reality and stuff. They're unaware of that. They just hear him talking about COVID-19 more recently. And pointing to that. Now, I want to show you, get into this sort of thing where David Icke is talking about COVID-19 being a fake virus. Okay. Now, I have said, and when the COVID-19 thing first went crazy, people can go back and they will see that I was on cam saying the overreaction to COVID-19 is nuts. This reeks of establishment manipulation and deception. But I did not at any point say that there was no virus. And I said that because whenever you approach a problem or a thesis that you're trying to understand, as the famed physicist Richard Feynman once said, the first thing you need to do is you need to ask yourself if it makes sense. Okay. So David Icke is saying that there is no virus. And he points to certain things to support his claim that there is no virus. But when you take that claim, again, your first thing that you need to do is you need to say, does it make sense? Okay, so to what end? To what end would you fake a virus, right? To what end? And furthermore, as I mentioned back in, I don't know, was it February? Something like that. I said that, if you want to say that Dr. Evil is out there and he's trying to, and I don't say that mockingly, because if people know what my views are of the establishment is nefarious, right? They are mass mind manipulators, and they aren't really interested in human life in general. So I just use Dr. Evil is an easy concept to lock into. But if you say that Dr. Evil out there is planning to bring in all kinds of totalitarian powers and stuff, and he's going to use a virus to justify that, like, he's got a couple of options at his disposal. He can either go out and fake a virus, create a total fake virus, right? Or he can attach it to a real virus, either a virus created in the lab or a virus that appears on its own. The thing is that new viruses are appearing all the time. There's no reason for somebody to create a fake virus. So if you're Dr. Evil and you want this to be as credible as possible, why would you not attach your agenda to a real virus that can be verified in a lab by scientists, right? So just on that level alone, it doesn't make sense. Like I say, the overreaction by the establishment is quite a separate issue. And yes, I believe they're using this to bring in all kinds of totalitarian powers and stuff. But the fake virus angle, I believe, is part of this mass mind manipulation bait and switch game. So you'll get people sort of to subscribe to this, and then later, and we'll get into this, right? Later they will show that the fake virus thing was nonsense. And then all of those people, most of whom are good inquiring people and stuff, will be dismissed, not only on that, but on many other things. This is an intelligence strategy. So we are immersed right now in intelligence strategies where there's deliberate manipulation. Now, before I go on to David Icke's theories on COVID-19, I want to show you something else that I think that if you watch carefully, you will understand the type of, like, what the establishment is up to and what kind of mind manipulation games they're playing. And I think this clip that I'm going to show you is going to illustrate for you just how sort of dishonest and manipulative manipulation has become. And this is from Donald Trump's lawyer, Rudolph Giuliani, former mayor of New York, who was involved in 9/11. I'm not going to break that down, but he was the mayor during 9/11 and stuff. And he's Donald Trump's lawyer, and he's got his own show now. And let's just listen to what Rudolph Giuliani has to say about Black Lives Matter here, and George Soros in particular. And I want you just to use your intuition. Okay, listen and ask yourself if this is a deliberate manipulation, a deliberate division strategy. Okay, listen carefully.
So this Black Lives Matter movement, when you hear it, please don't think it's about black lives. They have an agenda. Their agenda is to change, ultimately destroy the government of the United States the way it presently is constituted. They want a totally different kind of government that is on a socialist communist model, and that gives preference to people of one race. That's about the best way you could describe it. I don't want a group that hates white people, that hates America, that wants to destroy our system of government, that has been organized by Marxists and funded by terrorists, and the guy putting the money behind it is George Soros. He denies it. This is not, please, understand this. This is not spontaneous. This is planned. This is planned by Black Lives Matter. It's funded by Soros to the tune of $30 or $40 million. And the plan is to change your government, to take it away from you, to take away from you a government based on free enterprise, to take away from you your Second Amendment right to bear arms, to take away from you really your right to have a religion. Soros is a notorious atheist, proclaims the fact that he's an atheist. So are Marxists, by the way. It's one of the cores of Marxism is atheism. And one of the cores of Marxism is no private property. They want your property. They want the government to control it. But they do want one preferred class, and that's the people who are they're going to get like a lifetime salary. And that's going to be black people will get that. And they'll also get to choose property that they want, and that's the reparations for slavery. Except it'll include black people that came from the Caribbean, and it's going to get paid by white people who never had anything to do with slavery, ever. I mean, for example, my family came to America the latter part of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th, after the Civil War. And they came when Italians were the second largest group of people being lynched in America, right behind blacks. So I don't know why people who came here after slavery was over, I don't know why they would pay, what are they paying reparations for? They didn't do anything. Their family didn't do anything. They undermine our educational system with this 619 program. I want you to see that what you're facing is a planned, pretty well thought out 3, 4, 5 years ago, movement to get rid of the police, get rid of the government the way we know it, to get rid of the rights that we have, like our right to private property, and to replace it with something much closer to communism, Marxism, socialism, and don't be propagandized by NBC, CBS, ABC, the New York Times, the Washington Post. We have got to get together. We have to be together to preserve the American way of life. George Soros, Black Lives Matter, and the left wing are trying to rip it away from us. And I'll be darned if they're going to get it. This is too beautiful a country. It has done too many great things, even with its sins and faults, to have these people tear down its reputation, burn its flag, and destroy it. Not going to happen.
Okay, so that is, and the reason I'm interjecting this here is to show that there are elements at the highest level of our society deliberately inflaming and dividing people, and I would say maneuvering us to a state closer towards civil war. This is the lawyer of Donald Trump. Okay. So what some of the stuff that you see him doing there is, first of all, you can see him conflating Marxism, communism, and socialism as if they're all the same thing. They're not the same thing. Public education is a form of socialism. Okay. Public health care here in Canada, that is a form of socialism. Okay. It's not a form of communism. Okay. And to conflate those two, and the reason they conflate those things is because they hate any sort of resources going to help people. They want all those resources to be, at the disposal of the corporate establishment. There's a rapacious oligarchical class who wants to, maximize profits in their own mega wealth. And he would have you believe, in the context of that discussion, that George Soros putting $30 or $40 million into Black Lives Matter is going to be able to result in you or in them overturning the government of the United States of America. 20 or 30 million dollars apparently is enough so that they can go out there, overturn the government, take away everybody's private property, and give it to black people. Those nasty black people, right? And they might throw some crumbs to the good white people who supported them, right? And $30 million is going to be enough to do that. First of all, he's calling George Soros a Marxist communist, right? This is a hedge fund billionaire, okay? A hedge fund billionaire, okay? And he wants people to believe that this hedge fund billionaire wants to destroy, and if you look at Marxism and the Communist Manifesto, for instance, one of the primary and most important goals is to destroy particularly bourgeois private property and to remove the super wealthy from the equation. So the argument is that George Soros is out there in his $100 million yacht conspiring to remove himself of all of his wealth and his property. And that $30 million is going to be enough to do that. Now, we will, for instance, look at the $1 trillion pharmaceutical complex. The $1 trillion pharmaceutical complex could squash a $30 million movement without barely batting an eye. They could use their little economic finger to squash that, right? What Giuliani does not get into there, and none of these people who do this, including Jordan Peterson, right? This is why I called this, what's worse, lobsters or lizards, right? Because Jordan Peterson does this same thing where he talks about this evil Marxist collectivist agenda to, strip everybody of their private property and rights and stuff. But what he doesn't ever address, and Giuliani doesn't address is that the people who control the world right now are the mega corporations and the super rich, who comprise trillions and trillions. They have trillions and trillions of dollars of assets at their disposal. And if a legitimate Marxist threat came along that was going to try to strip them of their wealth and power, they have shallow graves dug in the desert right now for such people. Look at the history of the United States and how they have worked with the corporate establishment in South America and Central America and around the globe to squash and murder Marxists wherever they arise as a legitimate threat. And you think that they're just going to let them rise up in the United States or Canada and do that? Not a chance. They would bury them in shallow graves in the desert. So that is a significant omission from all of these people who are screaming about communists and Marxists. I believe this is all a mind manipulation game. And I talked about this 3 years ago when I wrote my Synanon essay, in the sense that I believed at that time that there was an effort underway to create chaos in society. And so Jordan Peterson came out with his book, which was subtitled "The Antidote to Chaos," right? And he's always talking about this chaos dragon and these neo-Marxists who are causing all this trouble. So I believe that there has been a move on in society to create division deliberately. Now, why would they want to do that? Okay, why would they want to divide society so much that, like back to my reference of the people on the steps of the legislature with the guns, right? The assault rifles, and the Black Lives Matter people with rifles and stuff. It's like they're trying to provoke them into a civil war and stuff. Why would the ruling powers want this kind of animosity and chaos? Well, what has this kind of animosity and chaos resulted in the pages of history? Okay, whether you're talking about, say, Nazi Germany or Italy, any of these places where chaos has broken out, it has become a justification for the implementation of totalitarian, brutal state power. Okay, the powers that be have said that they are engaging in a global reset right now. Okay, now this reset, I believe, is going to require much more state power. Now, the best way to get people pleading and begging for more brutal state power is to create chaos. Okay, so we have people like Giuliani and Peterson and other people out there fanning the flames of anger and hatred and selling this bogus fake Red Scare, right? As if a hedge fund billionaire is like a secret communist, right? It's absolutely, completely absurd on its face, and ignores the history of the Central Intelligence Agency and the U.S. military's involvement around the world in dealing with Marxist powers wherever they arise. Do a little research on something called the Jakarta method, right? And I've talked about before Operation Gladio, but this Operation Gladio is like this is a clue to you, and I'm going to talk about this on an upcoming show of the Agenda. Is a clue to you that exactly what we are seeing in our society today, where you've got people like Giuliani dividing and making people angry and getting people afraid that they're coming for your private property and stuff. This is a strategy that has been used over and over again in Central America and South America, in Europe, in Asia, this deliberate strategy to divide and provoke events that demonize, right? Demonize and get the whole population at war with each other. And when this happens, in comes your totalitarian champions who have the antidote to chaos to restore order by being the strong men, right? Right, the Ubermen, and they bring in the hierarchical power, right? So this is nothing new. Now, so the propaganda is out there, but when you are doing things like this, you need to disarm legitimate criticism of what is going on of the establishment. You need to disarm people like me, for instance, who are pointing to sort of errors in their arguments and pointing to history and stuff. You need to disarm people like me. And the best way to do that is to associate good arguments with bad arguments. Enter people like David Icke. So we are going to now return to David Icke and talk about his claim that the virus doesn't exist, right? forget the fact that it's counterintuitive. It doesn't make any sense when they could attach it to a real virus. He's saying that it's a fake virus and it doesn't exist. Okay. Well, I'm going to bring in another video here for you, or clips from a video. I'm going to put the links in this stream there. So David Icke says the virus is fake. There is no virus. Let's get his name. CoffeeZilla on YouTube, CoffeeZilla. But again, the link is there and you can go directly to his page. I've clipped this because he's got some very sort of cogent arguments. The video is quite long and he goes into a lot of stuff about Icke that we've already sort of covered. But here we go.
Okay, so the first thing I have to address, and literally the reason I'm making this video, is to give an opposing view to David Icke. Because no matter what you believe about his ideas, you absolutely cannot argue in that London Real interview you got a balanced view.
David, what's it like to watch 30 years of what you've been working on all come to fruition, prediction, reality in 3 weeks? What's it like?
Brian Rose, I have nothing against the guy, but those questions were Tempur-Pedic mattress levels of soft, okay? There was not, and I defy you to find one, a single hard question or substantial pushback Brian did the entire time. Not that it's his obligation to, but I think things would have gone differently if he had. Instead, what you get is this.
What do the rest of us do, David? What do we do? What's the way, David? What's the way out of this? Why are you more powerful than they are, David? Why? It seems so clear. It seems so obvious what you just said, David. I had a call with someone this week and they said, what's David like? And I paused and I said, David is a great man.
So that's why I'm making this video, to ask the follow-up questions that were not asked, to challenge the points that were not challenged. Okay, so we're gonna go point by point, challenge his ideas. The main one he gives in the video is this.
So this is the headline to start with, which will shock a lot of people, I'm sure. There is no COVID-19.
He says the reason we know this is because the only evidence for COVID is a RT-PCR test, which they use to test for the virus.
And it's called an RT-PCR test. And, wait for it, it doesn't test for COVID-19.
That test does not test for the virus. It does not test for viral load. Instead, it amplifies genetic material taken from the subject and checks for a genetic sequence, not COVID-19, the literal virus itself.
It tests for the genetic material, which has loads of different content.
Because of that, David argues, the test is not testing for COVID-19. It's only testing for a genetic sequence, which could be found in anything.
And they decided that what was causing the illness was a virus, which has got the name COVID-19. But at no time did they isolate that so-called virus from the rest of the genetic material.
That's his argument, just summarized really briefly. And it's almost completely wrong. Because what David doesn't mention is that scientists can and have done more than an RT-PCR test for COVID-19. They have isolated the virus from the lungs of patients and fully genetically sequenced it. Full stop. Like, this is something David is completely wrong on. He says this.
But at no time did they isolate that so-called virus.
In actuality, we have genetically sequenced the virus and isolated the virus, which you won't hear on London Real because this is never challenged, right? He just says we've never isolated the virus. In fact, we have. In this paper, dating back to February, it shows scientists in South Korea isolating the virus, and from that doing a full genetic sequence of the virus, cross-checks it with the virus found in China, which was fully genetically sequenced, and they were a 99.9% match. It's the same virus. This automatically debunks David Icke's main claim. Because his main claim is all we have is genetic material, not the full virus. We don't know what the virus is. We've never seen this virus. Nobody has any. We're just diagnosing off symptoms. This is not true. This isn't true. The virus David Icke said was made up and is a hoax was found and isolated months ago. And not only was it found and sequenced in Korea, not a section of the virus, the full virus, but it has also been tracked across the world. And COVID-19 has been fully genomically sequenced many times all across the world.
So let's just take a look at some of the evidence out there that seems to clearly refute what David Icke is saying. So we've got this one here. Severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 isolate. Wuhan 1 complete genome. Okay. And we got this one from the American Society of Microbiology. Complete genome sequence of the 2019 novel coronavirus strain isolate in Nepal. And we have this one from Science Daily. Whole genome of novel coronavirus. Whole genome of novel coronavirus 2019 sequenced. Okay, and that's Institut Pasteur in France. And then there's this one on Snapchain, which has the whole thing sort of mapped out. And if we go to the actual website here, you can see that we can scroll down and we can see that they've got the whole thing there. And this is by no means the only website. This is all out there. All people have to do is go and do a search for it.
And using that data, we've been able to discover how often it mutates, and you can see all this data on an open data project called NextStrain. I mean, it's incredible. It's an interactive map that shows where we found it, how different strains of it have emerged with mutations happening over time. And all this data has led us to believe that coronavirus mutates slower than the flu, for example, which is a good thing because if we create a vaccine, the vaccine will be relevant for longer because we won't have as many new strains appearing that you have to create a vaccine for. And you can look at all of this information, all this research for yourself, right? These people tell you, do your research. Well, there's some research for you to do, okay? Not only that, you can see the full genomic sequence of COVID-19, the full thing, right? The whole virus. According to David Icke, this shouldn't exist, right? This link down below should not exist, which is the entire genetic sequence of COVID-19. Here it is right now. Here's the genetic sequence of COVID-19. It can't exist because it's a hoax, right? No. You'll never hear this from David Icke. I don't know if he doesn't know that this happened or if he ignored that this happened, but you won't hear it. All he talks about is the PCR test, which again, is only a part of what we're doing. What you will hear from David Icke is that the coronavirus vaccine will have smart dust or nano chips to control people in it.
And in that vaccine will be nanotechnology microchips. So we basically become nothing more than computer terminals. That's the idea.
Does he provide any evidence for this? No. Does Brian Rose from London Real ask him for any evidence of this? No. This is where we come to that's a privileged knowledge claim. Do you believe that David Icke, who has no virology experience, who is consistently making some pretty wild claims, do you believe that he's right on that if he's providing no evidence? It's up to you. It's up to you. I just feel like the reason David Icke is so compelling for many people is because he often gets a little bit right. Like most of the time, the real-time PCR test is used. That's a true thing he said in the interview. And yes, it tests for genetic fragments. So people not knowing any better will say to themselves, oh, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And then they believe his theories. But he gets so much wrong in the details, and what he gets wrong completely destroys his arguments. And like I said, it isn't true that we haven't isolated the virus. We have sequenced it literally hundreds of times all across the world from totally different patients. And time and time again, COVID-19 shows up looking the same. Here's another example of something he got a little bit right, but totally wrong. In the interview, he mentions a doctor, and he links him on his website, that courageously broke ranks and said, you know, what I'm seeing in the ICU isn't COVID.
This is a New York doctor who's so exasperated he made a video. He just kind of really stepped out of the line, out of the box.
I want people to understand that when you have whenever somebody comes out with a thesis, particularly if it is a controversial thesis, and this goes back to Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and I certainly agree with that. But we've got two different positions here. So David Icke comes out with this extraordinary claim, okay, and he uses his Kaufman guy as his scientific backup, right? This one guy as his backup, okay. Now this one guy might be right? And David Icke may be right. But whenever you got like okay, so we're back to the common sense thing. Okay, so common sense. Why would they create a fake virus? To what end? Just to thumb their noses at people on something this critically important, right? Where they're trying to bring in all of these draconian powers. And I do not contest the fact that there are elements in our society who are trying to use the virus to bring in all kinds of totalitarian controls and stuff. I don't contest that fact, right? But I need to make sure that my information and my arguments are as solid as possible. So whenever somebody makes a claim like Icke is saying, right, and they come in with all of this information, the correct thing for me to do as somebody who's interested in the truth is not just to listen to David Icke and Kaufman. It is to go to the other side. Okay, so the people who are saying the complete opposite. And what are they saying? Okay, so we compare both sides, and we do our own research based on the links and the information that they're providing, and we see if we can come to, again, this is back to the thesis versus antithesis, okay? And the truth is either here or it's there, or maybe we get to a synthesis and the truth is somewhere in the middle, but we can never be sure about what we're believing if we just get one side of the equation. So I bring in this other guy into the equation because he's saying that David Icke is misrepresenting things, which is not, when we got people on the moon creating, control matrix and controlling humanity from the moon, it's not a stretch to think that David Icke might be making something up. Right? But not necessarily, because David Icke has released a lot of good information. He releases good information. That's why he's so compelling. That's why he's got like millions of people following him, because he does release good, interesting information, and he's very charismatic. I wish I had David Icke's charisma, right? Let alone his platform. But he's very convincing that way. But again, I can't let charisma be my guide. I need to look at both sides of the argument and come to my conclusions that way. So I'm presenting the other side of the argument. Okay. David Icke says it has COVID-19 has not been isolated and mapped, and we have evidence that it has been mapped. Okay, and I'm going to provide some of those links in the show notes when I get done. But all you have to do is go to Google and go COVID-19 genome map, and you will get all kinds of results that show that it's been mapped. And it includes, just as this guy did in this video, it actually shows you the whole map, basically, right? So if David Icke and Kaufman are saying this doesn't exist, then we have to go, okay, well, it appears that it does exist, right? And if there is, I don't know about Icke, but if Kaufman can seriously address the links that are provided in this video, the one that I'll show you again here in a moment, where it shows that it's been mapped. So what is his response to that? Anyway, we'll go back to this video.
This is what he said. Their lungs look like someone who's flying at 30,000 feet, and there's cabin pressure disappears, the oxygen disappears, and they slowly die of lack of oxygen. He said, I don't know what's going on, but it's not COVID-19, it's not an infectious disease, and I've never seen anything like it.
But that's not what the doctor quite said. The part he got right was this.
It is as if tens of thousands of my fellow New Yorkers are on a plane at 30,000 feet and the cabin pressure is slowly being let out.
But what he got wrong was that he said, oh, then the doctor said, this isn't COVID-19.
He said, I don't know what's going on, but it's not COVID-19. It's not an infectious disease.
That's not what he said.
COVID-19 lung disease is not a pneumonia. It appears as some kind of viral-induced disease, most resembling high-altitude sickness.
All he said was, we need to change medical strategies for treating these patients, which, if given a new virus, makes sense. Viruses aren't the same, the symptoms aren't going to be the same, right? So there's a manipulation of the facts there, right, to fit a narrative. The doctor says, this isn't what I expected, let's explore different treatment options. David Icke says, doctor breaks ranks and says there's no COVID-19. That isn't true, right? Actually, that isn't what happened. So he's wrong. And think about it. Look, it's all good and well for David Icke to be proclaiming it's all a hoax, from the privacy of his own home. If he's so sure that COVID-19 doesn't exist, why doesn't he take a trip to the ICU? Why doesn't he touch sick people and breathe in when the COVID-19 patients are hacking up their lungs? Since it wouldn't affect him, right? There's no COVID-19, it's just a hoax. He's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. David Icke will instead just sit there. He's going to spout off his nonsense about rising up. We're not going to take it. Stand up to the lizard people. And meanwhile, he sells thousands of more books. And guess who's getting hurt? Everyone else, because of the people who believe these kind of conspiracy theories. Because for the first time in a long time, it doesn't just affect the person who believes in a conspiracy theory to believe in that theory. It affects everyone else too, right? Because if you take this guy seriously, you're going to go spread your germs everywhere, because if the virus isn't real, it doesn't affect you.
Okay. So once again, I am going to remind you, because people get so inflamed and angry about things, I'm going to remind you that the proper methodology and path of procedure for trying to ascertain the truth in this confused world is to give both sides a full audience, right? And not to just take anybody's word for it. Like when I make claims, and I've said this in my talks when the other side has come at me, when I make claims, I provide the links and stuff. And he does provide the links in his video. But people get sort of emotionally invested in these things, and they want to believe that it's a fake virus for some reason. I guess the reason would be so you can go back to life as normal, and that's understandable and intelligible. My personal feeling is what it was when the virus first appeared, because I said that I thought I had it in late January, early February, because I had a nasty virus of some sort. I don't know what it was, but it was pretty nasty. So from the beginning, I said that the overreaction was crazy, and I didn't support that at all. And I lost a lot of followers because I was criticizing the lockdown, right? And I made a video about that to show the insanity of the reaction to COVID-19, which I regard as just another virus. I mean, you don't want to catch a virus. Like, you don't want to catch a flu. Throughout my entire life, if somebody has a flu or a cold or whatever, I say, stay away from me. Right. So I don't want to catch that and stuff. But that doesn't mean that I think that because there's a lot of people out there with the flu or the cold or whatever, that we need to shut down society. Right. And implement all of these draconian controls, and everybody has to go around wearing a face mask and all of this stuff. Right. That's a whole different story. But to suggest that the virus itself is fake, I believe it's counterintuitive. Okay, so on its face, it doesn't make sense. Why would they do that when they can attach it to a real virus? Why would they do that? Okay, so it doesn't pass the common sense test. And then when you go to the other side of the equation and they provide all of these links and say, look, it's been fully genome mapped and all of this stuff, and you go, okay, so now we're back to whether or not David Icke is a reliable source of information, right? And that's why I provided sort of that buildup there. Because my belief is and has been about David Icke for a long time that David Icke is just sort of kind of like Alex Jones, right? These are disinformation agents, right? So they will bring in all kinds of good ideas, and they will conflate and confuse them with these crazy ideas, just like the clip from the one video that I played there. And so people will throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? So this is why I take issue with people like David Icke, who has a huge platform, millions. Yeah, sure, he got deplatformed from some of the social media. Didn't hurt him at all, right? He's still got a massive followings, and he continues to be platformed by people such as London Real. And so let's get back to my idea that they are a mass mind manipulating people, right? They're playing games with people's heads, and they have a very condescending attitude. So let's just take a brief look at Mr. Giuliani again, and London Real. Just the parts that I think should be instructive to you, that the establishment is playing games with your head. And there are certain people who are platformed out there who are leading the charge. Like 3, there it is. I didn't think I started with Ike. Okay, so I want you to check out this attitude from the London Real guy. It is so sort of, and then he's clipped it here, right? It's this sort of, it's like they're mocking the audience, right? And making David Icke to be this superhero. Here we go.
What do the rest of us do, David? What do we do? What's the way, David? What's the way out of this? Why are you more powerful than they are, David? Why? It seems so clear. It seems so obvious what you just said, David. I had a call with someone this week and they said, "What's David like?" And I paused and I said, "David is a great man."
Okay, so subscribe to David Icke. He's a great man. He's going to bring you the truth. Don't mention the lizards. Don't mention any sort of contrary information, because whenever you come forward with a thesis, you have to address the counter thesis, just like I do with the suicide statistics in the transgender debate. I have to address the arguments of the other side. Here, they don't. They just, what David Icke says is true. There's no virus, but they're going to come up with a vaccine for the non-existent virus, and they're going to put nanoparticles in us and turn us all into walking computers under the control of the moon matrix, I guess. Now let's go on to Mr. Giuliani. And again, look at the sort of condescending attitude in the mind manipulation that's going on. They are playing with people. And I've said this for a long time. The people at the top of our society think that people are idiots and low-grade morons. Okay? And you see this over and over again.
I don't want a group that hates white people, that hates America, that wants to destroy our system of government, that has been organized by Marxists and funded by terrorists, and the guy putting the money behind it is George Soros. This is planned. This is planned by Black Lives Matter. It's funded by Soros to the tune of $30 or $40 million. And the plan is to change your government, to take it away from you, to take away from you a government based on free enterprise, to take away from you your Second Amendment right to bear arms, to take away from you really your right to have a religion. Soros is a notorious atheist, proclaims the fact.
So Soros is a notorious atheist. So who is he speaking to here? Okay, who is he trying to anger and make frightened? Okay, that evil, notorious atheist, George Soros, and his $20 million that's going to overturn the government of the United States and all of the trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars controlled by the corporate establishment who would squash a Marxist movement with their economic power. But just forget all of that. George Soros, the notorious atheist, who has connection to Jim Balsillie and helped found the Institute for New Economic Thinking with Jim Balsillie, the former BlackBerry tycoon, who's connected to Jordan Peterson, who worked at the United Nations. Okay, but no, George Soros, the hedge fund billionaire, is secretly a communist out to destroy the rights and property of the super wealthy. And more importantly, he's an atheist who doesn't believe in God, and he wants to steal your house and give it to black people.
That he's an atheist. So are Marxists, by the way. It's one of the cores of Marxism is atheism. And one of the cores of Marxism is no private property. They want your property. They want the government to control it. But they do want one preferred class, and that's the people who are they're going to get like a lifetime salary. And that's going to be black people will get that.
Okay, so this comment by Giuliani kind of reminded me of this political cartoon here. Careful, my friend. That black guy wants your cookie.
And they'll also get to choose property that they want, and that's the reparations for slavery.
This is the President of the United States lawyer. Okay? Former mayor of New York City, as high up in the political ranks as you can get, spreading what is essentially, okay, so he's trying to cause division, fear, and anger to put people at each other's throats. Like, I have to sort of sit in the middle of this, right? And say, yes, there are corrupt powers in our society. There's corrupt, crazy influences on the left. There's corrupt people on the right. Yes, right, okay. But these people are playing you. Okay, and they have people like Giuliani and Peterson out there pushing your buttons to get you angry and to hate those, especially if you're a Christian, to hate those atheists, those dreaded atheists, right? They're the worst, they're the most evil, they're Satanists, and they want to take your private property and give it to black people. How dare those communists want to take all your private property and give it to black people. And this communist revolution is being led by a hedge fund billionaire who wants to, rob himself of his own property and give all his wealth to everybody else, apparently. And then they have, but in that narrative where they're trying to divide people, they need to disarm people who are questioning the official propaganda. Right? And how do they do that? Okay, so when people sort of come out with good information, they need to take that information, give it to somebody who has a platform, like millions of followers, right? Who will put out that information, but then it becomes connected to all this other craziness. So the bulk of the population that Edward L. Bernays said that you had to target your propaganda at, okay, will look at this theory and see that it's been, the same guy who's promoting lizards on the moon controlling society, right? And they'll throw the whole thing out. Furthermore, they set us up all the time, okay? So they will encourage us to subscribe to something without more like researching it ourselves in more depth in order to expose us later and say, oh, look, these people just went with this crazy theory. And now we've proven that that's wrong. So everybody can just stop listening to them whatsoever. That is why from day one, I have talked to people that are in this debate with me, and I've talked to them about the importance of making sure the information is accurate. And whereas you do not know whether something is accurate, like my numbers on Dr. Wallace Wong, for instance, and the number of foster kids we're identifying, I qualify that by saying we will not know the actual numbers until we get a national inquiry. You have to always sort of qualify and clarify. And when you are making truth claims, you need to make sure that you have gone as far as you can to do that. And when other people are saying things that are not true or don't have proof to back them, you need to go after that to keep the message of truth as accurate and as clean as possible. And I take so much abuse for that from all sides of this debate, right? People who follow me will abandon me because they have emotionally attached to some sort of message. And they don't like to hear me come in with a contrary message. They think that suddenly I'm the enemy, right? So if I question David Icke, who's saying that there's no virus, well, now I'm the enemy and I'm with the establishment, right? No, I'm somebody who's interested in, okay, so what is the truth here? I'm interested in the truth, right? And it's not always an easy path to walk. But I'm giving you the formula here that I believe is the road to success, if you will. Okay, so I've kind of kept myself sort of, I would say, somewhat protected over the years that I've been in this debate by being stubbornly dedicated to making sure the information is accurate as possible and not spinning. And I get mad at people who spin and misrepresent facts and stuff, because it's so important in this debate. Because if you think that the people at the top of our society are stupid, you're going to be in for a rather serious surprise at some point. These people are not stupid. Okay, the people pushing agendas at the top of our society are the top of their classes, right? They're the very top of their classes in the very best universities in the United States. These people are brilliant. They are not stupid. And they can see people like me and you coming a mile away. And when we walk through this field towards the truth, they have put landmines everywhere for us to trip along the way. So every step that you take, you need to be cautious and careful, and you need to be aware that these people who are given a spotlight, okay, millions of people watching them, okay, you need to be aware that they're there for a reason. I would not say that everybody who's in the spotlight is necessarily, part of a planned agenda. They may just serve that agenda, because sometimes people are saying things on their own that serves the establishment agenda, so they platform them. But then there are other people who I would say are deliberate disinformation agents. I believe Alex Jones is one of those, and I believe that David Icke is one of those. You can take or leave that as you like. However, let me footnote this a bit by saying that doesn't mean that you can't listen to David Icke. Okay, if you want to listen to David Icke, you want to listen to Alex Jones. Alex Jones is actually funny sometimes, right? He's just such a over-the-top guy that sometimes he's fun. But whenever they're making rather extreme claims, or especially when they're making scientific claims, then you need to sort of go to that next level. So I say that transgender science is riddled with conflicts of interest, and we can't trust the science anymore because of this. But I don't just say that, right? I go out with all kinds of evidence to back that. And the other side has rebuttals to that, right? So they'll say, well, there's some conflict of interest you're going to have to put up with, right? That type of thing, intelligent rebuttals. But it's still, like, it's difficult. Like, this path that I've gone down for so long now, over 3 years, has been a difficult path for me, because I've always been interested in trying to get what's good and what's true. And over and over and over and over and over and over again, I am attacked by people who follow me, right? I've been beaten bloody by people who follow me because of my dedication to what I believe is true, and that I pursue the truth without reference to whether or not it's going to get me clicks or it's going to make me money. I pursue it for its own benefit, because that is what we need in our society today, is this sort of ruthless dedication to the facts and trying to, go that extra mile and determine what is true and false. Okay. The reason the other side has worked so hard to deplatform me in the transgender debate is because they know that I do all of that. Okay, they know that I do my homework. Morgan Ojeri will not debate me in a moderated debate at UBC that the Students for Freedom of Expression offered to host, right? Morgan Ojeri will not debate me because he knows that I will tear him apart, and because I come with carefully researched information, and he doesn't want that information getting to the public. So they constantly sort of deplatform me and do everything in their power to make sure nobody listens to me, because I have this ruthless dedication to the truth. Now, some people say that I'm mean because I have a dedication to the truth in terms of, for instance, men can't be women, right? And I believe it's important to protect our language. And so people will say to me that, oh, well, you're mean. You need to just surrender the truth a little bit. I'm like, no. Truth has to be our starting point, okay? All other debates around, say, the transgender issue, right? And how transgender rights are going to be protected and how they're going to be sort of allowed to integrate and live as they want in our society without being bullied in this type of thing. All of those discussions have to start at a recognition of the absolute truth. And the absolute truth we know, and there is zero evidence or proof. There's like ancillary, minor suggestive evidence to the contrary, but nothing resembling proof. It's just like, oh, well, that's interesting. But there's no proof that a man can become a woman, or that you're born in the wrong body. Okay, all of the evidence, right? All of the evidence to like a 99.99% certainty says that men cannot become women. That is the truth, and that needs to be our starting point for any discussions that we have. I don't want transgender people to be bullied and to live miserable lives and stuff. I also don't want transgender people to be bullying other people into accepting their versions of reality. I want a just system that is predicated first and foremost on truth. Okay, so I'm always pursuing that. Now, in some ways, you know, this whole debate between this guy and other guys and David Icke and whether the virus is real or fake is almost, it doesn't, I can say it doesn't matter to me, but it's not a big issue for me because first of all, it doesn't make sense. Okay, so that is always going to sort of color my approach to this. It doesn't make sense. Whether it's real or fake doesn't make any difference in terms of what the establishment is doing with it in terms of cracking down on our basic freedoms and stuff. I can't even give public talks anymore. Okay, I was supposed to do a talk tour in March of this year to start addressing serious issues that I haven't addressed before. I can't do those talks anymore. Okay, there are serious things that we need to be addressing, and whether it's based on a fake virus or a real virus is almost a side note to what is happening. Okay. And yes, they are cracking down on our freedoms. And yes, they are, telling us to wear masks in the open air is absurd and it's going too far. And people need to have a certain amount of freedom out there. Right. But we have to be interested in the truth. And that means listening to both sides of the argument and then doing our own research. So that is about it. I'm going to have to. Let me just look through the comments here and see if there's any comments. So I know Leslie's very emotionally involved in this. So Kaufman, 4 videos and 4 papers that never isolated the virus. Okay, but the problem was I don't care who he is. Right? I don't care who Kaufman is, right? This is again back to Richard Feynman, right? Greatest physicist of the 20th century. Noam Chomsky as well has said that when you're addressing an issue, you shouldn't be paying attention from the outset to somebody's credentials and stuff. That is informative and stuff, but their credentials you can't sort of defer. Okay, well, he's an expert, so what he's saying is true, right? I don't care what his credentials are. Okay, I want to look at the evidence because so much of science, so much of the science that we rely on, especially social sciences, is the data collection is one thing. Okay, and so best honest about it, collecting this data in a scientific manner and presenting it. Understanding what that information means is frequently something that anybody who's spent a minimum amount of time educating themselves can decide what they want to do with that information, right? So the Kaufman comes with 4 papers and videos about how it's never been isolated. Okay, well, the other side has come forward, and I've confirmed this with all kinds of scientific papers that say it has been isolated. Okay, so the Kaufman and Icke side, if they haven't already dealt with this, they need to deal with that, right? Kaufman is getting an awful lot of publicity doing what he's doing. Okay, is he monetizing that? I don't know, but it doesn't. In some ways, it doesn't matter whether he's monetizing it. The thing is that you can't just sort of take his information and say, okay, well, he has some sort of a scientific credential, so he's right. End of story. I'm wrong, right? Except when the other side comes in with other scientific stuff that contradicts that. Okay, you need to try to figure that out. So that's that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the Facebook audience go, and I'm going to switch exclusively to YouTube where I'm allowed to play music. So I'm going to say goodbye to the Facebook audience. I'm switching over to YouTube to get into my boom, exit music that I always like to do. So bye for now, Facebook. See any more comments? So it's been swell talking to everybody again. I think I'll probably have made all kinds of people angry who believe in the idea that the virus is fake and doesn't exist. But I'm not here to make people happy. I'm here to pursue the truth as I see it. If you can provide evidence that these genome studies are fake, I'd be interested in that. Or if you've got some sort of intelligent argument why I shouldn't pay attention to them, I'll pay attention to that too. But, you know, talking about Kaufman, okay, Kaufman needs to address these genome studies that he and David Icke apparently say don't exist. So that has to be addressed. So let's go to my outro. Everybody's just dying to know what my outro music is going to be. Well, some people.
It's already the time that you hope my mind is true. And I've been thinking about what to say or not to do. So you wanna be a man about it, do you? And have you figured out all you wanted? Have you? When your heart becomes a million different pieces, that's when you won't be able to recognize this feeling. That's called tough love. That's called tough love. That's called tough love. That's called tough love. In the middle of the night, all I think about is you. I traded all your clouds of glory. It's true. So you wanna be a man about it? Do you have to? And have you figured out all you wanted? Have you? When your heart becomes a million different pieces, that's when you won't be able to recognize this feeling. That's called tough love. That's called tough love. That's called tough love. That's called tough love. You let me crying out for more. 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 That's called tough love. That's called tough love. That's called tough love. That's called tough love.
Okay, time for my new wave pick for this week. Remember, I'm trying to bring back new wave.
It's cold outside, and the paint's spilling out of my walls.
for myself about little deals and issues, things I just don't understand.